Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Peugeot.
Hello again and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Peugeot, and today we're joined by Alexandra Nolan, who's a lifestyle expert and entrepreneur. Hi, Alexandra. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Gary. Thank you for having me.
What's the summer been like down in Memphis, Tennessee this year?
Really hot.
Like everywhere, right?
Yes, I swear. The year prior, I was like, oh, this is the hottest. But now this year, I feel like this is the hottest. It just gets hotter and hotter.
And the humidity, we get humidity up here in Michigan. I don't know what it's like in Tennessee, but
Same.
Yeah. So anyway, you're here actually to talk about cameras, consumer photography, and like the camera roll being the real-time scrapbook of people's lives. How did you get interested in that aspect of photography?
Well, my journey in photography kind of goes back, and it's a very unconventional journey. So I jumped on ship. I'm an OG blogger, I like to say. Back in 2012, when the whole blogging thing popped up, I was one of the first to jump on. And back then we used
Blogspot. Was it a blogspot?
I wasn't that no, blogger.com
Oh, there you
came
go.
after that. So I was Blogger. It doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, so I jumped on, and back then it was really important that your photos, Instagram, all the socials were like, the photos have to be perfect. They need to be professional grade. So we all were buying. I had the Nikon top camera. Never had taken a photography course in my life, but thanks to Google, I learned a little bit. And that's how I got started. I started doing my own photos, teaching my boyfriend at the time and later husband how to do photos. I was like, you got to take these photos for me. And so it's kind of like when all of these people just kind of started becoming amateur photographers because they were trying to mold themselves for the upcoming wave of social media and the new blogging boom.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you said you actually invested in a separate camera. You weren't doing, camera phones hadn't quite taken over that. Are you still a camera buff, or are you all smartphone these days?
I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for saying this because I do have some photographer friends, but I am 100% smartphone these days.
It is fine. That is fine.
There was a moment in time where I wouldn't admit that out loud because my photographer friends would be so upset with me. But no, I learned all the ins and outs, the f-stops, all of the things you have to know about photography. And then technology in our pockets just became so much, I don't want to say better, because you still get a lot of great quality and just unique creative things through an actual camera. But people were able to take high quality photos with their phone. And so I kind of made the swap, mainly because it's easier for me to put a phone on a tripod and take a photo than to try to put a big camera. And, you've got the front facing camera with the phone. I can see myself and all of those things.
Oh, that's exactly right. And trust me, the industry would much rather have everyone using a smartphone than no camera at all. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, traditional cameras are great, digital cameras are great, and there's, action cams and drones. I mean, you can have 17 cameras and do all the things, right? But, they don't do any good if they're not in your pocket, ready to use when you need to use it. So don't feel ashamed. Just be glad you're using it. So one of the reasons why you're here is you're here to share the results of this Harris Poll study that Amazon Photos, I should say, has commissioned to kind of talk about the importance of photos in people's lives and the feelings they have with that. So I'm very interested in you sharing those results.
Yes, absolutely. So I was really shocked by some of the data points with it. I mean, it all made sense, but it just kind of resonated with what I already felt inside. I just didn't realize everyone else was feeling the same.
Right.
So just some of the top things. And this may be pretty obvious, but the top emotion that Americans feel when they are scrolling through their camera roll. So, this is obviously photos, probably more iPhone photos or just cell phone photos, I guess, if we call it cell phone. They feel happiness. 60% of the respondents said
Mhm.
that they felt happiness when scrolling through their camera roll. And then happiness was followed by, which this one is a big one for me, and one that I immediately felt in a very strong way, actually, after downloading this app that
Mhm.
I'm obsessed with. I'll tell you about later, the Amazon Photos app. I felt the next one is nostalgia, 46%. That
Mhm.
was big for me. So happiness, you take photos in the moment and you go through your photos from the week or the party the night before and you feel happy
Sure.
enjoying all these things. But then when you are able to search back years prior and just maybe some of the forgotten memories, the very small minute moments that you just
Mhm.
kind of you were like, let me take a shot of that. And you find that photo and it takes you back to that moment and that little sliver of time that may not have even been a pivotal moment in your life. That feeling of nostalgia just overwhelms. And so that is the second feeling when behind happiness that people feel when they're
Mhm.
going through their camera roll. Then you've got joyfulness, amusement, gratefulness. I mean,
Mhm.
even awe is one of them. 16% feel awe. So there's all of these positive emotions
Sure.
that the study found that people experience.
Mm. It's interesting you said because there's a couple points I made notes on there on that. One was, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say negativity, but criticism kind of, taking a lot of pictures and doing all these kind of things. And, obviously there's a time and a place for that. You don't want to be taking up people's time in a restaurant, taking, pictures of your food and posing for selfies and delaying everyone. And, that sort of thing, I know everyone can agree that was obnoxious. But I think what kind of gets overlooked is you don't know the value of a picture sometimes when you take it. It's only when you go back and look for it that you realize that was the last picture of me and Bob together before, Bob had a, terrible motorcycle accident or something, right? So you don't, in context, you don't always know. So I liked what you said about, maybe not nostalgia, but remembrance or reinforcement of positive feelings.
Yeah, you really like I'm like this doesn't happen to me often. As you're saying this, it like the feeling of getting teary-eyed is happening because you say that you never really know. Growing up, my mom was just the photo queen, and we were always like, "Oh, stop! Oh my God, another!"
Exactly.
Like just years of it. And this will mark the 10th anniversary this December 14th that my brother passed away
Mhm.
in a terrible car accident. And one of the things we said, I remember less than 24 hours, we're all sitting around still in just shock, horror, and not knowing the feelings. My dad looked over and he's a pretty quiet guy and he's the one that hated the photos the most. And he just looked at her and hadn't said anything all night. And he said, honey, I am just so thankful for all those times you made us stand in photos.
Right.
And then my sister's like, let's go grab the photo books. And we sat there all night and we went through them. And it's just, you're right. They're just so precious. And even though they exist in our phone, I like a good old photo book that I can look at. I feel
Sure.
like I
Yeah.
can find them. I can't find the photo albums anymore to put my photos in. Yes, the photos are just, they're so precious. And those little moments you don't think about can mean a lifetime of happiness that you may not get to experience with someone. So,
Because it's an interesting thing we have where there's been some research done on like when photos have their most value, right? So, for example, commercial photos, like pictures you take at advertising or social media or whatever, they're valuable right when you take them, and they kind of decrease over time because things get out of fashion, right? But
mhm,
memory photos, like your nostalgia memories, your pictures of your kids, and
mhm,
those actually gain value over time,
mhm.
right? Because they
Yeah,
get more and more
absolutely.
important because you can't go back and recapture your child's first steps or those things. And you're glad you have them more and more as you go. So talk a little
Mhm.
bit then about your role as the person that they've asked to talk about this study. What drew you to it?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Photo retailers, energize your sales with ShareMe Chat, the proven texting platform. Using chat to text on your website keeps your customers connected and buying. See us at Pro and IPI to find out why dealers using ShareMe Chat close more sales without adding staff. Find out more at shareme.chat.
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, my whole entire life with being a mother, and any parent can really relate to this. I mean, photos, they're
Mhm.
just a given, especially when you have a camera phone. So there's that. But then also my full-time job is photos. I'm
Mhm.
creating photos, creating videos, capturing moments, being able to evoke feelings and memories out of
Mhm.
those special moments. So from someone who has just gone from being a child with a mother that just wouldn't put the camera down, to then
Mhm.
going to being a mother herself that won't put the camera down, and now also basically photos being my job.
Right.
I feel like it kind of it consumes pretty much every waking moment that I am not
Mhm.
asleep.
So what do you say to people who say things like, just put that away, put that thing down. I don't, stop taking pictures. I see it around in social media myself, the sort of, live in the moment, don't take any pictures. What's your response to that?
My husband says it all the time, so I have a perfect response for it. I told him, I said, "You'll be happy in a year's time when I make you that." I make him annual little slideshows, just random
Mhm.
ones. You know, the iPhone will put them together, little shows
Mhm.
of what you've done for
Sure.
2022 or whatever.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I make them and send them to him, and he's always like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot about that." I'm like, "You'll be happy." You'll be
Yeah.
happy when I took that. It don't, and I also say, come on, it only takes like a half a second. Just smile and let me get the
Right.
photo.
Because I think that is one of the things when you look at like what happens in families these days, right? Kids today are, much more media literate.
Oh
I don't know
yeah.
how old your children are, but mine are older. But one was creating content herself, right? So I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, I think it's a different, almost a generational difference where I don't think the nostalgia piece is going to mean as much to them until much later.
Later. Yeah. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I mean, if you think about it, even though the media is much different now, or the devices that we have are much different now than what they were when we were kids. I mean, my kids nowadays are like barely into middle school with phones. It still goes back to the in the moment. When you're a child, you just kind of live in the moment and take things day by day, and photos are taken and you're kind of like, whatever. They get,
Mhm.
your parents back in the day put them in a photo album. They end up Mine are, ended up moving with me to college and then to my first house in an attic, and then when I became a mom, I pulled them all down, and I the nostalgia comes and the appreciation for it comes so much later. And with that being said, though, talking about how technology was, I don't want to say it was non-existent, it just was nowhere where it is today.
Mhm.
Nowadays, though, the children, not only will they appreciate it later, they'll have access to it in much quicker, easier ways. They won't have to go up to their attic to get the access or whatever. And so because
Mhm.
it'll be in a phone. I mean, there's certain apps that can save photos and basically categorize your photo. Well, for one, I mentioned it earlier,
Mhm.
Amazon Photos.
Sure.
It's basically the photo album
Mhm.
of the actual tangible photo album, but now in your phone.
Mhm.
So for these children, I can imagine my kids when they get older.
Mhm.
I have all the photos of them through my Amazon Photos. I sort it by each child, like all
Mhm.
three of my kids.
Mhm.
Sort it by year, so we know how old they are, and then I plan on, because I already Amazon Photos will allow you to share your photo albums with family. So, of course, the grandparents have them. But later in life, it's
Mhm.
almost like I'm creating a lifelong scrapbook of my kids, because
Sure.
later in life, they'll be able to have access. I can give them access to that, and they can see all of their memories from the beginning. And used to, when Facebook first came out, I was like, oh, this will be it. I'll do my Facebook albums. But it's just never really, you just never know with
Yeah, well,
Facebook.
that's the thing with that is I think you have things you want to share. You may not to share it with, Mark Zuckerberg
The
and his
world.
and his
Yes, I
people, right?
know.
In terms of it, yeah, I mean, there's a very, public-private sort of component on that where, yeah, you want to share, but you want to be able to control the sharing, and you want to make sure that people who are sharing or can't reshare and do things like that. Now, one thing you mentioned
Exactly.
that was, I think, applicable is, the Amazon Photo and other apps like that. They are starting to add some AI and intelligence on there to help you with the sorting.
Yes, I love it. So not only, safety, security, that's why
Mhm.
I started taking all of my little younger me photo albums when I first had my boys, thinking, oh, this will be their scrapbooks. Of course, I started, any of this
Mhm.
can be hacked, and you don't want creepos,
Yeah,
uh,
sure.
having access to that. So I started moving all mine over to Amazon Photos, and for the security purpose. But also, I started moving my cloud photos from my phone into Amazon Photos because, yes, Amazon Photos can sort, and I know the iPhone sorts by face and year, but you can type in keywords and it will pull these photos up. So
Right.
to me, the AI in it is just incredible.
Mhm.
It's crazy to me how it knows my children. My oldest is 9 and my
Mhm.
youngest is 6. I have an 8-year-old in between. It's crazy to me how it even recognizes their faces at
Sure.
different,
Oh
and can
yeah.
separate them out as well, because both my 9-year-old and my 6-year-old look very similar when they were much younger, but it knows and it sorts
Mhm.
them.
Wow. So let's talk about the output side, because you mentioned that you have, you do some printing. I mean, back in
Hmm.
the day, you're going to do the old man thing. Back in the day, you had to print to see everything, right?
Right.
What do you think the role of print is to today's, young parents, right? I mean, you've got, 3 kids under the age of 10. That used to be the sweet spot demographic for the print market, right?
Right.
Because mom had to have all those prints and to give extra prints to grandma and all the other stuff. So, what do you think the role is for print in a world where print is more of an option and a choice as opposed to a requirement?
It's really crazy because back in the day you just printed your photos. That's just what you did,
Mhm.
And so nowadays I feel like the role of print has become more creative, to create
Mhm.
cher- objects that you can cherish, and memorable objects. So, for example, for my mother this year, or last year for Christmas, I had one of our family photos that we took on the iPhone, printed on a big canvas, and
Mhm.
so that she could hang it in her home. For my grandmother, she drinks coffee, so I had family photos of us printed on the coffee mug.
Right.
And these are just things that, people I feel like cherish so much more because of the lack of photos being printed. They're not just laying around everywhere. So now when you get something with a photo on it, it just means so much more.
Mhm.
I mean, here, I can show you an example. I mean, I've got a mouse pad with my kids' picture on it. So anytime I sit down for work, I can look at my babies, and it's much more special, I feel like, to print
Mhm.
photos as it was back in the day.
So, what would you recommend for the print side of the industry, right? Like my audience, to to connect more with people, to be able to encourage people to print more, right? I mean, it's always the industry research has always shown, people intend to print more than they do, and for whatever reason, they don't do it. Now, you being the sweet spot demographic for that industry, what could they do better to encourage you to print more?
You know, the one thing that has encouraged me to print more is basically creating these personalized gifts. I mean, when you think about gift giving,
Mhm.
especially if you're gonna market to an industry to try to get people to print more,
Mhm.
how can you make personalized, high quality products that people are going to want?
Mhm.
Back in the day, I feel like you could get something printed on a coffee mug and it'd be all pixelated, and the mug would just be a basic white mug. Like, how can you come up with something that's really cool? For instance, I saw recently someone had printed a whole entire family portrait on a blanket, on a fleece blanket, which was
Mhm.
really nice.
Mhm.
And then one that was even cooler is someone had printed you can put your child's head on like superheroes and put them on a blanket. And it's just,
Mhm.
these are things that kids want. These are things that people want. So to encourage
Mhm.
more print in
Mhm.
anything, I know we're talking about tangible goods,
Yeah.
but really to market, for gift giving.
So, but I guess like my question is because in my thinking, it's more of an awareness issue. Like you just talked about two products that if we went down the street and talked to people and said, "Hey, did you know this could happen? You can do this." And it's just right in your phone. You can select any one of half a dozen print sites, including Amazon Photos, to make these things, and it's only a button or click two away. Well, that's where I think the industry is kind of hung up on. It's all about how do we create awareness? And I mean, you're in the influencer industry. obviously that's tremendous, the being an influencer, but also is it really as effective thing to get people to print as much? That's where I think some of the disconnect happens, because just to be honest, a lot of the photo sites don't use influencers, right? They don't. They just go through, hey, here's 20% off. Well, if I'm not even aware of how good this product is, why do I want 20% off of something I'm not even aware of?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Awareness. I think sometimes when you're in a box and I've been doing something for so long that you just think everybody gets it because I see all the products. But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I remember basically doing a campaign where you can print, basically create your own family, not photo albums, but stories, family stories and stuff like that. And I'd seen a lot of influencers promoting it. And so they do, I think a lot of companies are starting to reach out into the influencer space or meeting the consumers where they are on social platforms, even if it isn't an influencer, running ads through social platforms as well to create awareness. But yes, I think the only way you're going to get people to understand that, this is even an option or available is, to let them know, to make them aware of it.
And the other thing is because like you said, they may have seen a photo mug from 10 years ago or
Yeah.
8, or the quality is so much better now, and the choice of different types of mugs and handles and sizes, and you can get a 10 ounce and a 12 ounce and a 16 ounce, and you can get a travel mug, and you can all these things you can make, which I think there's an awareness gap there. It's frustrating for a lot of people in the industry, because like you said, they focus solely on gifts, because in our industry, the fourth quarter is the biggest mark because it's all gifts, 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 but it really should just be sort of more of an everyday thing.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I wish, traditional printing of photos I almost feel like sometimes when you move away from something though, when you're wanting that nostalgia of the way things used to be, and it just all of a sudden starts to flip that way. So for example, I didn't really care much about photo albums for the longest time. And now that I think the last photo album that I have was probably from like 1998 or something like that. Like the actual, I was in a store the other day, like looking for the photo albums, trying to get back to that old traditional way. So I almost feel like the way, and it happens with a lot of things. It's not just photos. When you move away from something and you get so far away from it, you just want to feel that home, and you just want to feel that the way things used. That's the nostalgia part of it. So I feel like personally, as someone, and they're not even marketing, I think you could market photo albums again and printing again, and people would start getting back on it. I can think of an ad in my head being like, remember the good old days, in the 90s around the Christmas tree with your photo albums out and sharing family memories. Make your, go online and make yourself you print your photos up and make yourself a coffee book photo album, just like mom and dad used to have,
But it's interesting is people have tried different styles of that over the years, and that really is kind of what the traditional photo industry was built on, right? That was Kodak's whole message was, the Weepy Paul Anka song, where people would, see the wedding pictures and they'd cry, and then they'd want to get reprints, and, the heart tugging thing. And it's almost like people don't want to do that because they're almost too cynical now. And in terms of marketing, it's like, we don't want to market like that because my grandpa did that. What do you think about that? Or because I think we're touching on actually a sort of a universal, timeless sort of thing as opposed to a trendy thing.
Yeah, no, I think, and just marketing in general, going back to the basics, I think we have moved so far from, traditional marketing, which I get it that we do want to evolve in our marketing strategies. But I think that there's so much noise. I mean, there's so much noise to the consumer. Do this, do that, whether, your phone, your social, everywhere, just noise everywhere, that sometimes we do just want the traditional, peaceful, quiet, good old days. And so, I mean, there was this whole trend just last year about the 90s comeback, and all these videos were going viral, and photos, 90 people dressing up in 90s clothing and doing fashion shoots and stuff like that. The photos were going viral because people want that. People do want, a piece of it, especially in a world that's wild like it is today.
Yeah,
it's a piece of calm and good old days, grandma's cookies,
It does make me wonder if the people in, let's say 2014 44 are going to look back at 2024 and go, those are the good old days.
No, no.
I mean,
that's
it
scary.
is
Now that
just
you
to
say
make you
that.
kind of wonder, you know?
I'm glad my good old days were like early 90s, late
There you go.
80s.
There you go. So you touched on some of the things about marketing. You also do a lot with our entrepreneurship. Can you talk a little bit about your work there?
Yes. So obviously, backgrounds in marketing, especially with doing social media influencing. But I have launched and sold, I feel like I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've launched and sold businesses. I've recently launched a business in the hospitality industry.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's kind of my passion. And this has also helped to me with get into, I guess, photos, graphic design, all of that, because as an entrepreneur you want to do everything on your own. So as it started with photos for Instagram and all of that, now that I've launched I had a boutique at one point, a makeup line, all of that, taking the photos, extracting certain images out of them, creating graphic design with them. It's really kind of followed me all the way through.
Yeah, because it's kind of hard to escape photography and imaging if you're in marketing and entrepreneurship. It's sort of intertwined within
It is
that.
intertwined. Yeah. And entrepreneurship, branding, marketing, they all go together. And you just cannot do that without some sort of visual that is enticing and can capture the consumer's eye.
Let's talk a little before we kind of bring this to a close. Talk a little bit about your own. You've got 3 kids who are awesome. You mentioned earlier, passing things on to them. Do you think that's going to be in a digital form or in a physical form like photo books?
No, I would love for it to be in a physical form, but I just know the way my children operate. I mean, they are not the first generation, but close to the first generation that has not been on this earth without the digital world. I mean, I didn't have a computer in my home when I was a kid. That my kids are like, "What? You didn't have, what's that? You didn't have a computer?" So I would love to both. I mean, me being a mother, I'd like to have something tangible that I can print. Maybe it won't go in just a traditional photo album. I've actually started creating some scrapbooks. I've been printing photos and creating little scrapbooks.
Those are all good.
They don't care about them right now. And my husband's like, they're boys. They're not going to care. I'm like, I promise if they don't, their wives will one day.
Yeah.
But no, I think that having it digitally is just so super important, not only because it's there and it's safe and it's, they can access it at any time, but it's just the volume of photos. I mean, it's just, you can't print 5,000 photos. And I, as a mother, can't decide which one to delete. So,
yes, you can. I can point you to some people. If you
listen,
if you have a 5,000 print order, I've got some people who will be happy to handle that for you.
You're right. You can't. I'm the mom though that has like 5 of the same, but the heads just turn slightly a little bit. I'm like,
and that's where the digital technology comes in, because it's going to pick, of those 5 photos, it's going to pick the one that's the best.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, that's incredible. I love that because I can't make the decision. I almost feel guilty for deleting any photo with my child's face in it. So, and then today, what's really cool? I didn't even mention, we have the Amazon shows. Do you know what those are? They have the screens. We have the echoes, but we have the shows. And one of the cool things that I've started doing for my husband and my kids through the Amazon Photos app is I've been creating slideshows for them, and I can just uniquely change it up a little bit so they don't even know it's by their bathroom sink. So when my kids go to brush their teeth in the morning, sometimes I'll randomly take goofy photos of them throughout the week or whatever, and I will just put them up there, and all of a sudden they're brushing their teeth and they just have these weird faces and it's sliding through and they think it's funny, and it just really brings more joy and happiness to mornings which are stressful around our house. And same for my husband, just more loving photos and stuff like that. So speaking of gifting your children things in the future, you can actually gift your family outside of gifts of coffee mugs and tangible things. It's just a simple, have a slideshow made for them, and it takes 2 seconds. Pick some photos, hit enter on the app, and it just sends it to your show devices.
Nice. Awesome. So, Alexandra, it's been great talking to you. Where can people go to get more information about the things you do and the other things you mentioned?
Okay, well, you can go to citychicliving.com. That is my blog, and all things lifestyle, parenting, and mom, or Instagram at alexandra.nicole. And I know I've mentioned my favorite app for photos out there. That's the Amazon Photo app. You can download the Amazon Photo app through the App Store. But if you're a Prime member, which I feel like most of us are, you can get unlimited storage and get the photo app that way as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's been great to meet. I had fun talking. I always like to talk to like the key consumer, which is you, and find out really what you're thinking about photography, because it does change. And, people have been, the industry's been around a long time. So people can tend to be set in their ways. So I'm glad to have you share your ideas and your insights.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.